Tonight, we have a selection of 4 stories from Reddit. Are these stories true? You'll never know. So grab your bowl of popcorn or your pillow and welcome to Morbid Whispers House of Dreams. I think I saw Death herself one day by JustAClover. I saw Death herself one day. It was a beautiful, sunny winter day. I was riding the tram, lost in my thoughts as I was looking out of the window. The blazing sun in my eyes gave me a feeling of warmth. After a while, I looked around inside the vehicle. My gaze was stopped immediately as it fixed on the girl in front of me. I don't know why, but somehow she caught my attention. She was looking out of the window, lost in thought and daydreams, just like I had been before. I felt safe that I could discreetly look at her without her noticing. There was something special about her, maybe something a little weird, but I couldn't figure out what it was. She was pretty, but also kind of mousy. She was young, maybe 20, and rather small. Her eyes were light green. She wore a big slouchy wool cap over her dark brown hair, and her body was wrapped in layers of dark green, brown, blue, and black winter clothes. There was a backpack sitting on her lap. She had on stockings. Her legs were... Oh shit, she caught me looking. I immediately looked out the window as if something was fascinating out there. After a while, I checked to see if she was still looking at me. She was. Her eyes were fixed on me. Her expression was calm, warm even. She wouldn't let go. So I took all of my courage and looked her directly in the eyes. We held each other's gaze for a while. I was nervous at first, but her eyes made me relax away. We just looked at each other without saying a word. Somehow, it felt natural. She started to smile. My heart skipped a beat, and I smiled back. "So how are you?" I asked. I would never spontaneously talk to a girl on public transport. I was much too shy. But she made me feel so relaxed and confident. "I'm fine, thank you. And how are you?" Her voice was beautiful and gentle. "I'm fine as well, thank you." I didn't know what to say after that, so we just looked at each other for a while. I was drowning in her eyes. Keep the conversation going before she gets out, I thought. "So, where are you going?" I clumsily asked. "To a funeral," she answered. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I said, breaking a sweat. "Don't be. It's only a small one. I'll be okay." She smiled again. "Okay," I said. I had a feeling that I was really bad at this, and I slowly started getting nervous. Her smile, however, calmed me right down. She made me feel so safe, so warm, so... "What's in the backpack?" I asked. "My boyfriend's head," she said with a smile. I chuckled. I liked weird girls. But then I noticed something. There was dark red fluid coming from the backpack, running down her legs, forming a little red pool on the floor. My brain kind of stood still for a second. Something about this situation just got very serious. I looked at her face and smiled awkwardly, looking for that "gotcha" expression. But it never came. She just smiled calmly. Was she serious? "But it's impossible, right? Why do you have his head in your backpack?" I asked. She said, "We didn't get along anymore. We had a really good time, but all of the good things have to end someday." "I see. Did you kill him?" I was kind of running on autopilot. She looked out of the window dreamily and started petting the backpack like a cat. "You know, life is like that sometimes. We met 2 years ago. He picked me up from a very bad state. He made me laugh, showed me the nice things in life. He taught me to be happy again. And then, one day, I saw him in bed with..." She stopped with a lump in her throat, and she squeezed her backpack so that the red liquid oozed from it. Her eyes got wet. She caught herself again and continued. But it's okay. I've lost him, but I still know how to be happy. That's what I learned, and I don't need him for that anymore. Glad to hear that. She smiled at me. It was heartwarming. I'm gonna bury him in a park, under the tree where we had our first kiss. I'm sure he would have liked that, I replied. Somehow the whole situation was just pleasant. I liked talking to this girl. After a moment of silently smiling at each other, she said, I have to get out soon. Say, would you like to grab a cup of coffee sometime? Her question caught me off guard. I felt like a little boy, not knowing what I wanted to do. I smiled and blushed. Then I looked at her warm smile, her beautiful green eyes. I opened my mouth to say yes, but suddenly some strange forgotten instinct kicked in, and I asked, Did you love him? She didn't reply. Her gaze became sad and serious, and her smile turned into a bitter frown. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She looked at me with an unfathomable sadness, and I looked back at her with all the compassion I could offer. She wiped her face dry with her sleeve, got up, and got out. I never saw her again. To this day, I tell myself she made a joke, or that she was just being weird. I could have gone on a date with her. Of course, she didn't kill her boyfriend. But if I'm being completely honest with myself, I know. I saw death that day, and she was beautiful. A few days later, these strange men knocked at my door and asked me questions about a girl that I may have seen or chatted to. I decided to say I had not. Something caught my eye. They had a red symbol on their right chest that looks like a circle with 3 arrows pointing out from the sides. Psychotic Ex-Wife by Booze Daddy ILY. My daughter was never the type to run away or sneak out in the night. She was a straight-A student with a very bright future ahead of her. She was well liked around town and babysat for many of the neighborhood children. She has made such a great impression on the people of our small town. At least, it was impossible until last week. I work about an hour away from our home. Although it's a long commute, it lets me and my daughter live rather comfortably. So while I'm working, she has made herself useful in our town and is thriving. But last Tuesday, I got a call from her principal at our local high school. She explained that my daughter had been skipping class all day and her classmates hadn't heard from her. That phone call sent a shiver down my spine. I know it might not seem like a big deal, but it was so unlike my daughter. I did my best to shake it off and continue with my day. The clock seemed to move slower and slower as each minute passed by. I was itching to get home, to check up on my daughter. I was zoned out and getting anxious over the possibilities. All of a sudden, a loud ringing filled my ears. My phone was ringing again. The screeching came to a halt as soon as I picked up the phone. It was her home ec teacher. The two had been very close, and I've even became friends with Miss Rodriguez. I know that she hasn't been in school all day, and that is somewhat normal for kids her age. But something about the situation makes my skin crawl. I think you should come down to talk this out with the principal. I was relieved that I wasn't the only one terrified for my daughter's safety. We ended the call, and I hurried over to my boss's office. I had to quickly explain to her why I needed the day off. She was hesitant. She is cold, old woman, who likes things done her way. It took about 45 minutes for her to let me go, and I had already wasted so much time. For all we know, my daughter could be in serious danger. I ran down the hall with beads of sweat dripping down my face. I made it to the elevator when a large group of people in all black stepped out. It almost felt like the universe didn't want me to save my daughter, but I loved her, so I would do whatever it takes to make sure she's okay. My legs were tired as I ran to my small car. Thunder roared overhead as I struggled to find my keys. Once I was able to get in the car, I sped down the roads to find myself in the high school parking lot. Everything looked normal. There didn't seem to be anything out of place, at least until I walked into the front office. There, I was questioned by the secretary. My leg was bobbing up and down as I impatiently waited for some good news. The secretary explained to me that many of their teachers and peers have an eerie feeling about the case, and to keep trying to reassure everyone isn't helping. I feel like I'm at my lowest. My daughter is out there somewhere, and nobody knows where she is. That's when Miss Rodriguez walked in. She shook my hand and proceeded to hug me. "Have you found her yet?" Miss Rodriguez asked me with terror in her eyes. I silently shook my head when the school bell rang. Students were being dismissed and teachers were going home. I figured I had to wrap things up and head home. The office staff told me to call the police if my daughter isn't home by tonight, so I'm praying that I don't have to make that call. I slowly shuffle over to my car and sit down. I stare blankly at the wheel, too anxious to put my foot on the gas. I was horrified that I would never see my little girl ever again. But I took a deep breath and started home. I passed her favorite restaurant, her best friend's house, the coffee shop where she spends endless hours of money, the grocery store which she used to work at, and nearly everything reminded me of her. Next thing I know, I'm home. There's another car in the driveway, which was very strange. I had no idea who it could possibly be. I pulled up my cell phone and dialed the police. I hovered my finger over the call button as I carefully turned the keys to open the front door. On the floor, I see my daughter's body and my ex-wife standing above her with blood dripping all over her and a sickly smile on her face. She raised her knife and darted forward. My new brother, Darwin's Barnacle 01. I was happy being an only child. It might sound selfish, but I enjoyed being the sole focus of my parents' attention. It was just the three of us, and they lavished me with praise and affection. The apple of their eye. I was never lonely for playmates either. If I wanted someone to play with, I always had the neighborhood kids. Things changed the moment Aaron came along. My parents decided to adopt, so I barely even had time to adjust. He just appeared one day, without notice. Aaron was older than me, bigger and stronger too. He had a mess of fiery red hair and a temper to match. It wasn't long before I was being treated like his own personal punching bag. I pleaded with my parents to get rid of him, and I told them about how he would mistreat me when they weren't around. But they didn't seem to care. All they cared about from the second he moved in was Aaron, making sure he felt just like one of the family, devoting all their attention to him instead of me. They told me this was for the best, but I began to worry about what would happen to me if I was left alone with him. His beatings became relentless. Unfortunately for me, I did begin to be left alone with him often. My dad is some kind of government official, so he's frequently away on business. My mom was around more at the beginning, but she came down with a bad case of shingles, so she's been sleeping a lot of the time lately. I tried my best to hang around with friends as much as possible for some escapism. But as the nights became darker and the weather began to worsen, I was forced to spend more time indoors with him, the two of us, alone. I was almost at a breaking point. I swear he was getting worse, and yet no one seemed to care. You have to understand, I only wanted rid of him for my own safety. And then yesterday, Aaron was giving me my daily beating, right on cue. Fortunately, he was interrupted by a knock on the door. My mom rushed from her bedroom to answer it. Two serious-looking men stood there, insisting she hand over her firstborn child. Slowly, she pointed towards Aaron. Feels good to be an only child again. Modern Medusa by 1001 Nights. The final step took place one night during an evening walk to an old local graveyard. I looked at the sculptures adorning the graves, their human expressions full of emotion, reached out and gently touched the stone face of a young girl, frozen in perpetual agonized wonder, and something clicked in me. I knew the spell had worked. I turned and hurried home, my head bowed. I didn't want to look at anybody. Not that I needed to worry. Middle-aged, mumsy woman by herself being the least interesting thing to look at. Less interesting than a stray cat. The cat passed. For a moment I wanted to look at it, to see if my new power would work, but I felt sorry for it. I was done. Done with the human race. I just wanted to live my days out alone, and if anyone but anyone bothered me, my look would turn them into stone, even online. Only audio with me, please. My mom found this out to her downfall when she had insisted on switching to FaceTime video. I told her again and again, Mom, stop it, please. I can't switch to video. But she went on and on about it. What's going on? Is there something wrong? Did something happen to your face? Did you break out? Eventually, I was like, fine, here, look at me. Happy now? It took 5 seconds, and the sad thing was that by the third second she realized what was happening. The stone took over from her feet upward in a wave. Her face frozen in a look of downward horror as she was staring at her stone legs poking out from beneath the stone hem of her stone house dress. At least Dad will have some peace and quiet now. I hung up. I couldn't bear to watch what was going to happen next. For my mom was the second person who received the full brunt of my new Medusa powers. The first one was unfortunate. The Amazon delivery guy. I told him through the door to just leave the package and go. He wouldn't listen. Went on and on about needing a signature. I wasn't sure yet whether that final graveyard spell had worked or not, and just to get rid of him, I opened the door to sign. Yes, the spell had indeed worked. I went to get the wheelbarrow from my shed to move the delivery guy's statue from my front door, and I returned just in time to hear a loud crack. The statue broke in half, and then each half crumbled further. Within seconds there was a pile of small stones and dust on my steps. Oh, poor Mom. Well, listeners, if you've made it this far into the video, we have a little bonus for you, as well as a warning. This next story is rather chilling. John the Apostle by BloodySpaghetti. Once a teenager had lost a bet and was forced to spend a night at an abandoned house. He wasn't easily scared, so he took up the challenge, letting his parents know he'll be out camping with his friends. He packed up a sleeping bag, a couple bottles of water, and a few snacks. At dusk, he arrived at the chosen abandoned house, surveying the area for any signs of life. He didn't see anyone out there but himself. The building was in terrible condition. The walls were blackened with soot and covered in all sorts of profane graffiti markings. The teen was about to walk inside the building when a gruff voice called out to him from behind. A homeless man stood behind him, appearing almost out of thin air. He was tall and skinny, deathly skinny. One of his eyes was completely clouded, and his teeth were brown from decay, what was left of them. He was clad in torn and dirty clothes befitting a homeless person. The man kept rumbling something under his breath before issuing a warning to the teen.
I wouldn't go in there, boy. Someone already lives there.
The teen felt cheeky and quipped in return. One of your buddies lives there?
Oh, no. Something else lives there.
The man slurred out, almost fearfully. Then I'll be fine, said the teen, before walking inside the dilapidated structure.
People who enter after dark don't leave that place, boy. You hear me? Come out while you can.
The homeless man's shouting echoed through the wreck. The teen thought the man was absolutely crazy and decided to ignore him. He knew all about the ghost stories surrounding that place, but he didn't believe any of them. Instead, he looked around the decaying building for anything remotely interesting or dangerous, but could not find anything other than charred furniture and blackened walls. In one room, he found a pile of old, ragged clothes in one corner. It seemed newer than the rest of the stuff in the building, but he couldn't be sure since it was getting dark. Feeling tired, the teen made his bed in the same room and went to sleep there. The night passed peacefully for him. Right before dawn, though, the sound of a weeping child awoke him. The moon was illuminating the room he was in, the golden light caressing what the teen had thought was a pile of clothes. Fear gripped at his throat as he sat face to face with the skeletal remains of a man, an ancient corpse with too many holes in the skull. The weeping got louder, but he didn't pay it any mind. Instead, he raced out as fast as his feet would carry him. Leaving his sleeping bag behind, the boy raced out of the wreckage. He ran and ran until he ran into the same homeless man that had told him to stay away from the building.
Whoa, boy. Watch where you're going,
the man croaked as he stopped the teen. The boy was heaving and shaking, his skin as pale as a ghost.
Oh, it's you. I told you not to go in there. Did you see it? Did the thing see you?
The homeless man questioned. Corpse. I saw a corpse. The boy choked as his jaw shook with fear.
You're lucky, kid. You saw Apostle John out there. Be thankful it was him and not the thing that left him in his current state.
The homeless man remarked, almost gleefully. Apostle John? The boy sheepishly asked, as he was trying to gather his bearings.
Yeah, he was one of us. Tall, ugly, abandoned by everyone. But he was a man of God. So we called him Apostle John, because nobody knew his name. He never told us his name. All he ever talked about was the Bible, God's love. Never worked out for him, though. You and I both know how he ended up. Dead.
The homeless man said, almost barking with a tinge of glee in his voice. Spitting loudly onto the ground, the teen took a deep breath before saying, I heard a crying child out there. The man's demeanor changed. His good eye almost darkened.
So, you heard it. Consider yourself lucky to be alive, boy. Even Apostle John couldn't escape it, and he had God on his side, boy.
What is it? The teen asked, between heavy breaths.
Wraith. A vicious specter that has found its home in the burned mess. It comes out at night and won't let anyone it finds leave,
the homeless man remarked, stroking his gray beard. So, the stories are true? the teen remarked.
Nah, boy. Most them are lies made up to keep people like you out of there. If you heard about this home burning with the boy and his dog inside, that one's true. They burned inside, died a horrible death. I was wee small, smaller than you when it happened.
The homeless man reminisced.
They tried to destroy the place, but before it came to be, the people in charge all died, torn to pieces or disappear.
He continued.
So they kept it alone, not letting people in, until they figured it's safe when the sun is out. Then they forgot, but we never did. We kept the memories alive.
What about the weeping sound? Is that the ghost of the child? The teen asked.
Dunno, boy. Dunno. Some say the two was joined at the hip. I heard people saying it looks like a werewolf with two kitty hands dangling on its trunk and a human face on the side of the head. I don't know. I never seen this thing. Apostle John heard about it. He wasn't local, so he wanted to fix this. We tried to stop him, but couldn't. I heard him screaming and begging for help that night.
Tears streamed down the homeless man's eyes.
He was a good man, a man of God. It killed him.
The teen stood there watching the homeless man well up before offering his condolences. The homeless man told him to stay away from the building while it was still dark. He told him to stay away from the place at all costs. And when the teen quipped about wanting to get his sleeping bag back, he said it's probably torn to shreds by then. The teen refused to listen and waited for the sun to rise before he went back inside the abandoned building. The first thing he noticed was the vapid stench of wet fur assaulting his nostrils. He cautiously made his way to the room in which he had slept, trying to be as quiet as possible to avoid detection by whatever was inside. Soon enough, he was once again face to face with Apostle John, the rays of sunlight making his torturous demise all the more obvious. His skull had way too many holes. His chest cavity was crushed, and one of his legs was torn off. The teen felt uneasy, and his eyes darted for the sleeping bag. The hairs on the back of his head stood when he saw it was turned into ripped shreds, and a crying of a child tore through the silence right behind him. And there you have it. 4 creepy stories with one bonus extra scary story thrown in for my dear listeners. If you like this content, please consider subscribing and hit that like button. It helps me out a lot. And I'll see you next time. Morbid Whispers, House of Dreams.